We now have about 15, 20 minutes for some questions, and it's been really helpful to see the questions coming through on the question and answer box, and we will be taking note of all of those because we can't cover them all. But looking at them, they kind of divide themselves into four main areas: process, practice, people, and provision. So I'm going to start off with a few of the process questions and target those to Anne and Lorraine, if that's okay. So the kind of process questions that came through were about what is the best practice, resources and examples of helping the victim of bullying and preventing bullying in the workplace and pulpits. What is stopping bullying being put onto the safeguarding agenda? Is a lack of policy that is fit for purpose and lack of lay accountability, does that mean bullies are attracted to the church? What's the best way of bringing a case of bullying to higher authority? And what can some be done if a diocese refuses to follow police recommendations, etc.? So there are a few of the process questions. So Lorraine and Anne, do you want to pick up on some of those as you feel led?
Yeah, could I start with saying a little bit about the relationship between bullying and safeguarding?
Yeah, please do.
I am conscious that they genuinely are closely related. And that's partly because of my perspective of the responsibility the church has towards survivors of abuse. So if you have a survivor of abuse in a situation where bullying isn't properly dealt with, there's a risk that they can be bullied. So the church as a safe place for survivors of abuse needs a church that responds really well to bullying. So I believe they're connected. I don't think they can usually sit with the same group of people, because safeguarding is so big and puts so many demands on those working in safeguarding that to place responsibilities for approaches to bullying with those same people, I think just risks that neither are done as well as they might. So I'd like to see bullying rest with very many more people, but still perhaps retain a strong human resources element, but specifically not be taken wholly into safeguarding, that different people acknowledge the areas they're working in are related.
Great, thank you, Lorraine.
Lorraine, I hear where you're coming from, but I don't really agree with you. Bullying is abuse.
Yes.
Abuse is dealt with by safeguarding. We need a safe church which will free us from abuse. So I think we have to. It may be different people, it may be people with different areas of expertise, because I suspect the expertise that you need to deal with survivors of sexual abuse is not the same as you need to deal with survivors of bullying. But the damage done by people who are bullied is identical with the damage done to people who are sexually abused. Bullying is abuse.
And I do agree with you in that, Anne. And I agree with the seriousness and the amount of energy, but unfortunately, bullying is abuse that is not recognised in law directly.
Well, in the UK,
bullying as such is illegal because of its health and safety implications and things like constructive dismissal. It's not illegal to bully in the same way that sexual abuse is illegal, and I think that makes it difficult for them to be held together. But I utterly respect what you're saying about the impact and the seriousness and the nature.
Right, I'm going to stop it there. I'm really sorry. But what we've done there beautifully is highlight some of the tensions that are taking place. I'm going to move on to another question, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. We haven't got much time. And these questions are about people. And I was going to kind of target these at Augustine and Clive, if that's okay. One direct question for Augustine. Augustine, can you say something about intersectionality, race, gender, LGBTQI+, and how do we stay aware of blind spots in the context of bullying? And also, how do we speak about oppression whilst being aware of our own privilege. Another one, negative acts may become a coping strategy for the person being bullied, and that can muddy the waters. Any wisdom on that? Another one, upwards bullying. When women move to senior positions, you often get the accusation of being a bully, and we've seen this in both public and the private domain. And then how is bullying in the local parish church different from bullying by the episcopacy and bullying by the wider Church of England? So there's some questions there. Who wants to kick off? Augustine and Clive?
Yeah, I can try. I think one of the really important things about intersectional understandings of just people in general is that we all come with our different aspects of our identity and who we are. So looking at things intersectionally, I think it is pastorally the most sensitive, I think. So I think that's really, really important. I would say this, it's so weird because like whoever anonymous person said blind spots. So I have to say, here is one of my things I mess up with. I use blind spots, and I've been very much aware of people who are sight impaired saying blind spots is a negative thing, so they're not using blind spots. So it's like even though language of like actually saying blind spots, which I would use all the time, is actually can be really oppressive. So and that's still one of my areas that I'm working on, without a doubt, with language, because language is powerful. I would also say, I think, how would we speak about oppression while examining our privilege? So it's interesting. So if some of the people follow me on Twitter, I had to write an article about this understanding of, and this is a bigger deal, so forgive me if this opens up a can of worms, but I had to write an article about the word Karen. And people were very, very upset that I used that term. And most of the people that were upset were white middle-aged women, because they said that it was offensive and sexist. Now it's interesting because the term was birthed out of the Black Lives Matter movement, which basically said that a lot of, especially white women, would voice their concern about being oppressed by Black people. And Karen's is a way of helping basically people protect their privilege, actually. But instead of people being like, actually, let's understand what Black people are talking about, Black and brown people are talking about when it comes to this idea of Karen, people just went on the deep end and said, actually, you're being oppressive. And there's something there about white tears being the loudest voice and things like that. And people didn't want to engage in actually what does this whole idea of Karen means, but they went directly into being, oh, I feel oppressed. That's a sexist language, where actually it's about a particular type of person, Karen and Richard. So it's really fascinating. But I think examining our own privileges is something that's really, really important. Understanding bullying and understanding the idea of just getting along with people in general. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Augustine. Clive, did you want to pick up on any of those?
Yeah, if I could just very briefly. It was a point about the victim actually responding, and it turns into a battle. And one of the articles that we're putting into our resources section is from Paul Lowry, and it's talking about designing IT systems to try and prevent bullying in the first place. But he talks a lot in there about lack of balance in control, because the bully overcomes the balance and has more power. And, power's been a big thing this morning. And his observation is that with cyberbullying, people don't just want to get enough power to restore the balance. They actually want to overwhelm you. And he's listed loads of scenarios of how people try to do that. And they're all bad, in that getting into what you call a flame war on a bulletin board service or something, where people are just throwing insults around, it's actually pointless, and it damages the person who gets into that, and it's got to be stopped, and it isn't the right way to go about it. But there's an Australian educational psychologist, and I can't remember her name offhand, who says that it's like in the playground where two kids are fighting, you pull them apart and you punish them both. But if one of them was being bullied by the other one, that's intrinsically the wrong thing to do, because you're punishing somebody for responding to something that was done to them. So it is difficult, but the key thing is calm it down. Now, I've had to tell Lorraine that she has a big red switch on her control panel for this Zoom conference. And if we all had gone offside completely today and misbehaved, she can press the big red button and she can silence us all, and she can shut down this webinar and stop us doing bad things. And with cyber side of this, the key thing is to shut it down and to calm it, because otherwise it will just escalate and escalate.
Thanks so much, Clive. We've now got 5 minutes and 2 more P's to cover. There's 1 P, practice for Andrew, and the provision I'm going to take to Janet and David, who've been part of the planning group. So Andrew, there are 3 areas of practice I'm going to bring up. One question: if preferment and patronage by bishops and other senior clergy is a factor, is preferment and patronage by bishops and other senior clergy a factor that sustains misuse of power and that enables bullying? In the recent Fletcher case, we could see the patronage and preferment being a big obstacle to moving forward. Another question: is selection of senior clergy an aspect of passive bullying? And another one, that was 3 that cover the areas of fears of washing dirty linen in public, keeping people quiet. You mentioned that. A bit about fear of gossip, preventing people bringing things, and also the fear of what would happen if you bring things into open debate. I don't know if you want to pick up any of the themes in that. Just a couple of minutes on that would be brilliant.
Thank you, Rhoda, and thank you for those questions. I think clearly preferment and patronage are exercises of power. And as I said, whenever there are exercises of power and imbalances of power, there are potentials for bullying. And it's clear, it would seem in the Jonathan Fletcher case, given the amount of power he had in certain parts of the evangelical world, that was one of the factors. And that meant this was not addressed for so long. And obviously one of the ways to try and counter that is to have better systems of appointment, to have diffuse power in terms of appointment processes. And when we see appointment processes being concentrated either structurally or in individuals in particular cultures, as maybe happened with Jonathan Fletcher, then we need to be cautious about that. It runs risks, including risks of bullying happening and not being addressed. And that obviously also applies in terms of more wider appointments, from the questions I understood at a selection of senior clergy. The fear of washing dirty linen and gossip, those are, many of the reasons why people don't say anything or are told they really shouldn't be saying anything. I think that's wrong in principle. In that, we need to speak truthfully about what the situation is, and we need to address and identify the wrongs that are there. Also, for example, the case of Jonathan Fletcher, as we mentioned, shows that dirty linen builds up and up and up, and the stench and everything that comes from it eventually will come out, and it will be even worse. So on a purely consequentialist, looking at the consequences, I also think that is not a convincing argument, although that isn't foolproof. As we know, there are many cases in which cover-ups have been effective, but they're not something that I think, as a community which is meant to be speaking the truth and love, we should be engaging in. Gossip. Gossip is a problem. It can be, a means of bullying, as I think was noted by at least one of the presenters earlier. One of the ways to try and prevent that is by having better, clearer and more effective formal structures of dealing with this that can be used and trusted.
Thanks. In our final 2 minutes, Janet and David, who were part of the planning group for this whole conference today as well. It's the area of provision, resources. What resources are there for clergy being bullied by senior staff through silencing, sidelining, docketing appointments, etc.? And also, what resources are there for people being bullied by congregations? So we have got a resources list for accessing help and support that will be on the ABEL website, but what resources are available to support people who are experiencing bullying? Janet or David, who wants to take it first?
I'm afraid I'm not aware of any resources to support people being bullied. I think it very much depends on which diocese you're in. rather than there being a system of resources. I think some dioceses have bullying policies which are effective, and the senior personnel are aware of those policies and are not bullies themselves. Other dioceses, I'm afraid, just don't want to know. So I don't think it's as easy as saying, here.
You don't think it's as easy?
As saying, you know, there is this set of resources. If you're being bullied, this is what you can do. I don't think it's as easy as that.
Thank you very much.
I think it depends largely on your archdeacon and your bishop.
Thank you ever so much, Janet.